All right, welcome to the Fight Block. This is episode number 4. It's our first ever, I've done prediction videos in the past, but for the Fight Block podcast, it's our very first prediction show. I'm here once again with
Coop,
thanks for joining me. UFC 152, a lot of changes from the original card, but it's happening. Some good fights.
Yeah, actually, even if it's not the fight that everybody wanted to see initially, I think it's still going to be one that people are going to tune in to see with the card shift too and the cancellation of 151. It's made this card, 152, quite a bit more stacked for sure. I think that, I'll definitely be tuning in personally. You?
Oh, yeah. I'm interested in the fights. And like you said, yeah, with the 151 cancellation, it's been a while since we seen a pay-per-view show and a big card, so I'm looking forward to the fights. So we're going to start off the agenda on this episode. We're going to give our predictions for UFC 152. Start out with that. I'm going to go over the main card for the most part. And then a couple big stories in the MMA world this week. UFC 153 completely just
blown out of the water.
Yeah, turned upside down. Jose Aldo out with an injury. That was the main event. He was supposed to take on Frankie Edgar. That fight's postponed for the moment. They look like they still want to make that fight happen. And then also, Glover Teixeira and Rampage Jackson isn't happening because Rampage is also injured. So, and that happened in the same day. So both co-main event and the main event are canceled. And so UFC 153, new fights on tap. Anderson Silva taking on Stephan Bonnar in the light heavyweight division.
It'll be Anderson Silva's third fight at 205 pounds and his second fight against an Ultimate Fighter contestant.
And the co-main event?
Co-main event is going to be Glover Teixeira, and he's now taking on, is it Fabio Maldonado?
Yeah, well done. Yes, the name escaped my mind, but yeah, Fabio Maldonado stepped up. I believe he's Brazilian also. So
he is. He actually he lost a really good fight, actually. His last fight, he lost a split decision to Igor Pokrayets, who's most notably known to MMA fans. If you don't know him from his fighting, you should. He's a pretty good fighter, good gatekeeper, but he was a protege of Mirko Cro Cop. A lot of people know him because of that.
And then we also got Big Nog taking on
Dave Pee-wee Herman.
Yeah, so that's an additional fight. So, not horrible fights. It's unfortunate we lost. Aldo and Edgar was a huge fight that a lot of MMA fans were looking forward to, including myself. It was one of those dream matchups, a super fight sort of thing. And, unfortunately, hopefully that happens, down the road. But we're going to talk a little bit more about UFC 153. And then we're also going to touch on, let's see, they had Ultimate Fighter first episode. We're going to do a quick recap on that. And
Team Nelson versus Team Carwin this season.
Yep. And, I think that's about it for headlines. So whatever time we have left after our predictions, we'll go on to that. But starting off first, we're going to go on to Word on the Block. And our homie, Crebo X, stopped by, made a couple comments, just wanted to say what's up back, and wanted to know a little bit about us. So, but yeah, thanks for stopping by, and,
thanks for the comments. Appreciate the friendly remarks.
Yeah, and then also got a guy that used to comment on some of my videos back when I was first starting, Prince of Thieves, stopped by, had a couple nice words to say, and he asked us one question though. He said he was expecting video format, ESPN Live stuff coming from us soon. And actually, I've considered trying to look into to growing this thing, definitely with the video format, and looking more into the Google Hangouts as an option. That way, we can get other people on too. So it's not just you and me. We can get other people to drop their thoughts. So,
what about the concept of us wearing suits on the show?
If we're gonna be on video, we gotta look nice. So yeah, you never know. Build our own studio or something.
Sounds good to me.
All right, all in the works. But yeah, he also, was from what I see in the comment, I think he's looking for Anderson Silva against Bonnar. It is a crazy matchup, and I think that's what kind of makes the matchup kind of interesting. Yeah, Bonnar's a huge underdog, but you never know. Everyone likes the underdog story, and I wouldn't completely count Bonnar out in that fight, but we'll touch more on that at the end of the show. We're going to go into our predictions right now. UFC 152. Start off with our main card predictions. First fight on the card. It's a featherweight matchup between two guys on a little bit of a roll. Cub Swanson taking on Charles Oliveira.
No Bronx.
Yes, Oliveira is recently dropped down to the featherweight division. He is 2-0 since dropping down, both victories by submission. Cub Swanson on a little bit of a roll himself. He's 2-0 also, with a big win over Ross Pearson in his last fight. That was some can consider that quite an upset.
Yeah, I think a lot of people count Cub Swanson out when they watch fights where he just gets dominated, like against Jose Aldo or Jens Pulver. But I mean, you look at the guy's record; he's 22-5. He's really only lost two guys who were, future title contenders, champions. I mean, Jose Aldo is one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. I mean, I know he lost to him very quickly. He did lose to Ricardo Lamas, who's a guy that people are like lauding as potential title challenger himself. Chad Mendes challenged for the title. So really, other than those four, he's only lost to Shannon Gugerty, which is his first fight. So you can't really count that. Although it was a submission loss in 15 seconds, which is somewhat hard to do.
Ouch.
But other than that, I mean, he has a solid record. He seems to be able to beat a lot of the B-level guys, but not beat any of the A-level guys. That being said, he's always an exciting guy. He's won some fight of the night bonuses, knockout of the night as well. Definitely makes for an interesting matchup, and I think their two styles match up in a way that the fans are going to get excited for. And I think the one thing they have in common, although Oliveira is more of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expert and Swanson's, a little bit more of a brawler, is their tenacity and their aggressiveness. Both of them are very aggressive with their style, and I think this might be one of those fights that just goes all over the place.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great fight to start off the pay-per-view. Like you said, I mean, Cub Swanson, he has lost to legitimate contenders and, current champions in Jose Aldo. So, I mean, unfortunately, he hasn't been able to string together the win streaks like he's wanted. He's kind of wins one, lose one, win one,
yeah,
lose
a lot
one.
like Bart Palashevsky.
Yeah, so now he's sitting on a 2-fight win streak with a great matchup here with Charles Oliveira, who's like you said, a jiu-jitsu expert, very, very dangerous. He can just grab a hold of you on the feet and take you down and, slap something on. I mean, the guy's very tricky with his submissions. His striking, though, it's a little bit stiff. Definitely a work in progress.
Yeah, very unpolished. I mean, at best, it helps set up his ground game. But sometimes it doesn't even necessarily succeed in doing that the best. Sometimes it kind of is mainly just used to keep the opponent honest so they don't, think they can just rush in and knock him out.
Yeah, and I mean, both these guys, they're big featherweights for the most part. Cub Swanson, very lengthy.
Huge. And
Oliveira, like I mentioned, just recently dropping down from lightweight. So both guys are, bigger in size for the division. But, like you said, I think this one goes back and forth. And I would give a slight advantage to Cub Swanson on the feet. I think, he has a little bit more of an advantage there. But, Oliveira's submission game is just dangerous. And
speaking of only losing to notable people, his losses were not just at 155, but they were to Donald Cerrone and Jim Miller, who are, two of the top guys at 155, and it was a weight class above where he's fighting now. So, how much weight can you really put into those? It's almost like looking at somebody's past and judging them on that instead of their future. So, if you look at it on his terms at his new weight, he's undefeated.
Yeah, definitely. And, I guess I'll throw out my pick here. I think it'll be back and forth, but I just see it being a matter of time before Oliveira grabs onto Swanson. I can see him getting Swanson's back and working in a choke. I think this will go past the first round where, I think, Swanson could come out, win a round, win maybe even 2 rounds, but I think Oliveira snatches on a submission and submits Swanson. I'll say Oliveira pulls off the win here by submission, rear naked choke in the second round.
Yeah, I think for me at least, I don't know about you, I think this may be early candidate for potential fight of the night.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that it'll kind of spill just each and every way. I don't think either guy's going to be too tentative. they're not really necessarily known to be either. I see Cub Swanson potentially lighting up Charles Oliveira a little bit on the feet, and maybe, like you said, even winning a round or winning the majority of the fight until he gets submitted. That isn't to say it's, somebody's dominating and then just gets caught. I mean, it's all about the setups for Oliveira. I do see him snatching a potential arm or maybe a triangle choke after potentially being rocked by Cub Swanson, and or maybe in a scramble. He catches him on something, or he gets a dominant position, takes his back and then sinks in a rear naked choke. But Swanson has shown he can be submitted before, so I think that that's the most likely of scenarios. I think I'm going to go with Charles, submission, round 2.
All right, we both agree. So moving on to the next fight, Matt Hamill makes his UFC return coming out of retirement, taking on newcomer in UFC, Roger Hollett. Hollett actually, for whatever reason, stepped out of the fight originally. UFC got Vladimir Matyushenko to step in to take on Matt Hamill. Matyushenko got hurt, and so once again, Roger Hollett is stepping in to take on Matt Hamill. So we're getting the original matchup that was originally booked. So
makes you wonder why he pulled out, like a broken nail or something.
Yeah, I have no idea. But Hollett is 13-3. He's riding a 5-fight win streak right now outside the UFC. His last fight was inside the Bellator cage. So he's coming over, takes on a returning Matt Hamill, who I'm also kind of curious as to what brought Hamill out of retirement, if he's truly motivated to make another run at it, or if there's other reasons for coming out of retirement. I don't know. I'm hoping we see a motivated Matt Hamill stepping into this cage. I'm a fan of Hamill, and I want to see this guy perform in the division. He definitely has potential, but he's just never seemed to be able to reach it. But Hamill, his last loss was to Alexander Gustafsson, who, as we all know, is a rising star and top in the division right now. Actually taking on Mauricio Shogun Rua in his next fight, which is most likely a number 1 contendership fight.
For title implications written all over it.
So Gustafsson was no joke. Defeated Hamill by TKO, but Hamill's back. He's got the wrestling background. Definitely improved striking, but doesn't have the greatest striking. But he definitely can knock people out. He's got the power. And as for Roger Hollett, haven't seen much of him. He is a kickboxer, so he's got decent striking. But if he does have a weakness, it's off his back. I watched a couple of his videos, and he looked pretty weak once his opponent took him down to the ground. But he does have some submissions under his belt. Like I said, I haven't seen all his fights, but I'm guessing that they're coming from top position submissions. So Hamill's got the wrestling background, but we've kind of haven't really seen him use his wrestling in his last few fights. He has struggled to take people down, and he's just kind of.
I don't think he's abandoned it because he tried it against Rampage. It looked horrible. It was their easily stuffed takedowns.
Yeah, he just wasn't timing his takedowns right. He wasn't setting them up, and but yeah. So we all know Hamill's got the wrestling background, top collegiate wrestler, and. But yeah, I think if Hamill wins this fight, he's got to put Hollett on his back and utilize some ground and pound. Like I said, Hollett is a kickboxer, so his strengths are on his feet. And I don't know, with the long layoff for Hamill, how in shape he's going to be, if he's going to have any ring rust or whatnot. But he hasn't always been a very fast striker, so he's got to be careful standing with Hollett.
Yeah, there's and that's interesting you bring that up too, because it makes me wonder about Roger Hollett as well, because in pulling out for undisclosed reasons, it makes you wonder what that reason was, like we were saying, not just out of curiosity, but because that could potentially affect the fight. Hamill has the ring rust, so that's a huge X factor, even if he should be able to take Roger Hollett down. But, depending on what Hollett's reasons for pulling out was, it could be maybe a family issue, maybe his head's not in it, or it could have been an injury that maybe he thinks he can fight through, since the UFC absolutely really needed him. So, there's a lot of, it's really hard to pick a fight where there's really strong X factors. I'm usually 100% against going with long layoffs, because I've seen fights happen for guys after long layoffs that they should have won, maybe 9 times out of 10 in my book, and I've seen them lose. Ring rust is a very real thing, and I think that's why in Pride you'd see a lot of guys get warm-up fights here and there. Rampage Jackson's been very vocal about talking about that and saying how it would change careers for guys. So it's really it's a tough pick for me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think ring rust could play a big factor, and I've always questioned Hamill's motivation. Sometimes when he steps in, it just doesn't seem like he's 100% ready to go. But I don't know. I think Hamill's going to come out, and I'm hoping he fights a smart fight, because I definitely think this is his fight to lose. And, you never really want to come out of retirement and lose. So a win is, I'm sure, important for Hamill, and especially with his career and going forward, if he does choose to really make this a comeback run, this is possibly be a must-win for him. And I'm going to drop my prediction. I think Hamill comes out and he gets it done. I don't know if I'm quite looking forward to this fight. Like you said, ring rust and just Hollett making his debut, he might be tentative. I'm not expecting fireworks. But if Hamill fights smart, uses his wrestling, takes us to the ground, utilizes some ground and pound, which we haven't seen from him in a while, I could see him winning. If they stand and trade, I wouldn't count Hamill out. Hamill definitely, is known for brawling, and he can take a punch, but I just don't see this.
Can't outstrike a kickboxer, though.
Yeah, so I definitely think Hamill does enough. Like I said, not going to be the most exciting, I don't think, but I think Hamill grinds out a decision.
Yeah, I think the only way it's exciting is if Hollett wins, to be honest, or Hamill wins in past Hamill form, which we haven't seen in a while. I'm talking about the Hamill that, dominated Tim Boetsch on the ground with his ground control.
Knocked out Mark Munoz with that kick.
Yeah, and I don't think you'll see him do that to a kickboxer, and you don't see the real aggressive ground and pound from Matt Hamill as much as he used to. Again, Hollett, we don't know what that reason was that he was pulling out, and on top of that, UFC jitters are, again, just like ring rust, a very real thing. This one, I think, may end up being people's popcorn break. I don't think either of these guys are boring fighters at all. I just think that this matchup at this point in time, at their careers, given the circumstances, may make it not super exciting. Hamill, don't get me wrong, inspiration, especially with what he's overcome with being deaf and everything. I actually personally have not seen his movie yet, The Hammer, but I really want to. Definitely one of those American dream kind of stories. Well, I guess technically any country could identify to it. So one of those dream kind of stories. But yeah, I don't know that Matt Hamill, even in his own head, is convincing himself that this is a title run, especially after he's come out of retirement. I mean, Randy Couture's was kind of the exception, not the rule. That isn't to say that once your title aspirations are over, or once you're, not quite as good as you were, you should retire. I mean, if every guy who should retire right after they peaked, that we wouldn't have gotten to see fights like Vanderlei versus Chuck. So, as long as you're healthy, I think that you should keep fighting. And as long as you want to fight, I think you should keep fighting. So that's just my opinion. But anyways, I still am looking at Matt Hamill as a gatekeeper for the division while he hangs around. And he's an interesting guy to fill cards with. In this fight, I am going to have to take Hamill. I think that there's two possible really likely scenarios. The first being that Hamill tries some takedowns and maybe wins the first round and then gets tired as the fight goes on, and then Hollett kind of, picks him apart a little bit striking. But what I see happening is Hamill taking him down, maybe putting him against the fence and using positional control to really control Hollett and some ground and pound here and there. I don't think it'll be atrocious, but I don't think it's going to be an exciting fight, like I said.
So you're taking Hamill by
Matt Hamill, unanimous decision.
All right, we are 2 for 2 on our picks. Let me just say that we haven't really talked at all about who we're picking, so we're just kind of winging it right now. So
hopefully we disagree.
Yeah, hopefully. I don't know. This next matchup, we'll see. It's kind of the one I'm most looking forward to, and one reason is, Brian Stann, I would have to say at this time, is probably my favorite fighter.
At least your favorite middleweight.
Yeah, definitely favorite middleweight. Taking on kind of one of my least favorite middleweights in Michael Bisping.
What about least favorite fighters overall?
For you?
For you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, kind of. He's growing on me back again a little bit now. I don't know.
Bisping or Tito?
Oh, definitely Tito. Tito's my least favorite. Not a fan of Tito. But yeah, Bisping's a close second behind Tito. But yeah. So Michael Bisping taking on Brian Stann. Awesome matchup. Both guys contenders in the middleweight division. Brian Stann coming off of a knockout victory over Alessio Sakara. But unfortunately, he's coming off a knee injury. So, hopefully he's 100% and ready to go for this fight. But, it's always tough to go with someone that's coming off of an injury. You never know how healed they are. But yeah, Brian Stann coming off an injury. Michael Bisping coming off a loss to Chael Sonnen. Very, very close fight. It was a number one contendership fight. Winner got a shot at Anderson Silva. Chael Sonnen won and went on and fought Anderson Silva and lost. But Michael Bisping gave Sonnen all he could handle and actually was really good in that fight. Arguably won the fight and did a good job stopping several of Sonnen's takedowns. And just overall, I was really impressed with Bisping in that fight. So this is a tough matchup. Brian Stann got the power hands. Bisping, not really known for knocking people out. He's a solid striker, but he picks his shots, his combinations. Definitely improving on his wrestling and ground game. But yeah, Brian Stann, we all know his weakness is his wrestling.
Yeah, it's not necessarily his submissions, because he has shown he can submit guys.
Who?
Stann.
Yeah.
Mike Macenzio, for instance.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, he's got that, strength grip where, he slaps his arms around your throat, man. Go to sleep. So, Brian Stann, very strong guy. And, but yeah, wrestling has definitely been his weakness, and he's been working a lot on his wrestling. Whether he's improved or not, we'll see, but, he knows it's his weakness, and he's done a lot of training to improve his wrestling. So, with that being said, as much as I want to pick Brian Stann in this fight, it's tough. How Brian wins this fight is by knocking Bisping out, I think. He's got a TKO Bisping. I don't see him submitting Bisping. So, definitely knocking him out, where I believe most of this fight will take place on the feet. And it's just going to be a matter of, Bisping using his speed and his technical striking to get in and out, land his shots, and avoid Brian Stann's power shot. So I guess I'm going with Bisping as much as I hate to in this fight. I'm really going to be pulling for Stann. And, Stann definitely can catch Bisping and finish this fight. But, I'm going to take Michael Bisping in this fight. I think he outstrikes Stann. He lands more shots. I don't see him finishing Stann, but I think Bisping looks impressive in this fight. And I'm going with another decision fight here. I'm taking Michael Bisping to beat Brian Stann by unanimous decision. I think I think this is going to be a fairly exciting fight, back and forth, and but I think Bisping edges it out.
I'm going to read these comments recently from Michael Bisping on Brian Stann, who, for the record, no one dislikes. And then we're going to see if Michael Bisping's still growing on you.
Well, let's hear him.
All right. It's a little bit lengthy, but I'll read it fast. Come on, guys. Just because Stann trained with some smug git from New Mexico who can quote the Ninja Turtles doesn't mean he's got some mystical insight to beat me. Listen, Greg Jackson has a smug grin on his face when his game plans go well, but when they go tits up, he's not there going, well, blame me, folks. The fighter just followed my stupid ideas. And Brian Stann isn't a fighter who can follow through with a sophisticated strategy anyway.
No, Bisping.
But wait, there's more.
Yes.
He then went on to talk about how he has a good chin, and he did credit Stann's knockout power. But, I mean, he did go on to say that, the one time he had been knocked out was by Dan Henderson. He said he made a stupid mistake, quoting him, I mince Brian Stann's ass like a burger 9 times out of 10. And he said, I've not seen too much evolution in his game. And he said he's the same guy, someone who will always be dangerous, but isn't a top talent in the division and never will be.
We'll see about that. I could definitely see a Hendo repeat. If Stann's fist connects with Bisping's chin, I could very well see Bisping going out, and that is what I'm rooting for. Not a fan of Bisping, and but yeah, much as I hate picking him, man, Bisping by decision, but man, I'd love to see Brian Stann pull a Hendo and just knock out Bisping again.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody's pulling for. Bisping even remarked that he's tired of Brian Stann talking about who's going to knock him out. But he's like, whatever, you can't control that. He said, I'm sure Brian's going to tell some more deathly boring old war stories at the pre-fight press conference, and we're all going to be in for a snooze. He then, his closing comments were, I was kicking ass in the UFC when Stan was peeling potatoes, shining shoes, and getting called a maggot by some red-faced sergeant in the Marines. This isn't warfare, this is MMA, and I'm better at it than Brian Stann will ever be. On September 22nd, Brian Stann is getting knocked out fast. And currently Bisping is a slight favorite at minus 165, and Stann is at plus 153.
Yeah, and I also know Bisping threw out some diss where he said, I'd rather be knocked out by Hendo than knocked out by Steve Cantwell. Yeah, Cantwell, in the WEC, it was Brian Stann's trilogy fight with Steve Cantwell, some solid fights between the two guys. Cantwell definitely had a lot of potential, but never put anything together, and just could not win in the UFC when he came over at all. And Brian Stann, definitely the more successful of the two, but also lost by TKO to Steve Cantwell back in the WEC. But yeah, that was another diss Bisping threw out there. So I mean, I don't really hear Brian Stann running his mouth. Yeah, he says he's going to knock him out, and
yeah, that's just cockiness, though. I mean, Brian Stann, at worst, he's just confident in himself and just believes in his own skill.
Yeah, like every other fighter going into a fight. But yeah, so, Coop, what are your thoughts? Who are you picking in this fight?
First of all, I'd like to say that I think if you picture all those quotes being said at least for I do when I'm reading this, if I picture being said in Michael Bisping's voice, I actually find it pretty amusing, even though I'm rooting for Brian Stann. I think this is just another one of those instances where everybody looks at the guy who has a big power, and then they say, Bisping has kind of a suspect chin, but I think it's more of Bisping. So I think his chin's actually pretty good. I think he just puts himself in situations sometimes where he's going to get hit, like against Dennis Kang, or, Hendo, he's circled right into the power hand. It's not that he can get tagged and knocked out by shots that other guys can withstand easily. It's that he sometimes is as good a technical striker as he is. He still does have a propensity for putting himself in bad places here and there. I'm not going to say impressed against Sonnen. I was surprised that his takedown defense was actually that good. The British are known for really good striking. The Americans are known for good wrestling historically.
Good striking and poor wrestling.
Yeah, and Americans are known for good wrestling and, not really much else. And the Brazilians are known for jiu-jitsu, and Europeans are known for kickboxing, and so on and so forth. But, Bisping actually was, impressive isn't the right word, but I guess I have to use that just for lack of a better word. Because I wouldn't argue with you if you thought that Bisping won that fight, basically.
No, yeah, well, I think a lot of people felt Sonnen was just going to take down Bisping and, just ground and pound and do the typical Chael Sonnen fight style to him. But, Bisping put up a fight. So I think it's, like you said, it surprised a lot of people, and in a sense was, an impressive showing from Bisping from, going against what everyone thought would happen.
Yeah, I think everybody thought it was going to be a repeat of Chael Sonnen against like a Yushin Okami or
Brian Stann.
Yeah, or I didn't necessarily expect him to finish Michael Bisping because Michael Bisping is really hard to submit. But I did see him, just ground and pounding him, taking him down over and over. Maybe a little bit reminiscent of the Nate Marquardt fight. I think that is what I was mainly expecting. In this fight, again, it's one of those situations where Michael Bisping's against a big power puncher, and the mistake that the power punchers seem to make over and over and over against Bisping, you saw it with Akiyama, Dennis Kang, and so many other guys, is that they would just headhunt the whole time. Oh, Dan Henderson did it. He's been tagged. I can do it too. And I'm afraid Brian Stann's going to make that mistake. Dan Henderson he gets labeled as one-dimensional. He's not. There's a lot of tricks up his sleeve that enable him to land his, big right hand It's because of setups, Otherwise, everybody knows it's coming. Everybody. It's his signature. It's like, Mirko Krokop's left head kick. Everybody knows they're coming, but, at least for Mirko back in his pre-UFC days, he set it up expertly. And then Henderson as well, with kind of wading in with leg kicks like he did on Bisping and making him kind of look low, cutting off certain parts of Bisping's movement at times. That's how he landed it. It isn't just because Henderson hits that much harder than all the other guys that Bisping has faced. He does hit very hard, but at the same time, I think there's other guys who've hit Bisping or could potentially hit Bisping just as hard. It's just not timed in the right place. This fight, if Stan can mix it up, go to the body, fight really smart, I definitely think he has the capability of putting Bisping out. In fact, I think he may even give him a few scary moments, kind of like Akiyama did. Hit some power shots on him, maybe even win a round. But I think as this fight goes on is where you'll see like the skill kind of, Bisping will run away with the fight a little bit. I think that's where the gap will appear. I think he'll land a lot of volume strikes, and he may even, I think, potentially stop Stan late in the fight, although I'm going to kind of think that I tend to think maybe more like a decision's likely.
Decision for Michael Bisping?
I'm going to go Michael Bisping. I'm actually going to go with a late TKO from Michael Bisping.
Wow.
He overwhelms him.
TKO, see, you got me sitting here kind of reconsidering my pick. Like, I'm visualizing Bisping's fight with Vanderlei and how Vanderlei did a good job of being the aggressor, pushing Bisping up against the cage. And there was a close moment where, Vanderlei almost finished Bisping because he backed him so far up against the cage. Bisping ran into the cage. He just swarmed him, was super aggressive. I could see, like you mentioned, Brian Stann is fighting out of Greg Jackson's camp, so he's going to come in with some sort of game plan. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see Brian Stann try and mix things up and, go for a few takedowns himself, try and put Bisping on his back, mix up his striking with some takedowns. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that from Stann. I also wouldn't be surprised if we saw him, really try and be the aggressor, push Bisping up against the cage, close that distance, and, drive Bisping's back up against the cage, be the aggressor, and look to finish the fight that way. I'm still going to stick with Bisping. I think he avoids it, the power shot, and wins a decision. But I definitely think the game plan and coming from Greg Jackson should definitely be an interesting thing to look for, how Stan approaches this fight.
Oh, yeah. If we had to also put a label on every fight of, biggest, X factor where the fight's going to be decided, basically, this one's going to be decided not necessarily in who hits harder, but it's in Brian Stann's game plan. This whole fight, I think, is dependent on Brian Stann's game plan. Michael Bisping, I think we know exactly what to expect from him in this fight. He's fought guys like Stan before. We know what it looks like when he fights that way. You've seen the blueprint for it a lot, so I think I know exactly what to expect from Michael Bisping, but I'm not exactly sure what to expect from Brian Stann. On one hand, he gets called a little bit one-dimensional sometimes by certain guys that say he doesn't have a full skill set. But again, when you come from Greg Jackson, you never know exactly what a fighter's going to do. Look at the Clay Guida, Gray Maynard fight. He has a tendency to make fighters kind of fight against their styles sometimes even. And then other times you'll see him really complement their styles too. So it really just depends on what kind of game plan they have and how well Stan executes it. I think that the blueprint for this fight, yes, there are Henderson's he can watch a little bit, but like you said, I think Vanderlei's is more of the blueprint to watch for how to beat Bisping in this case. I think that if Brian Stann can fight in a similar way to that I could see him winning a decision or potentially stopping Michael Bisping for sure. But I'm just going to have to go with the smart money on this one, stick by Bisping. He is the more tried and true commodity at 185. He's one of those guys who's either wildly underrated by his critics and by certain, anti-British Americans, or he's really overrated. A lot of his fans are talking about why he hasn't got a title shot yet, and I don't really think that he can say he deserves one yet. But, I am looking forward to this fight, another fight that may have fight of the night written on it or knockout of the night. So definitely don't miss this one.
Definitely, yeah, probably the fight I'm most looking forward to on the card. But moving along to the co-main event and what was originally the main event, it's Joseph Benavidez taking on DeMetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson in what will be UFC history. in the making. It's the first ever Flyweight Championship. Or did I say that right? No. Flyweight, yeah. Flyweight Championship in the UFC. And, we kind of had a little mini tournament. 4 guys fighting. This is technically the finals now. And, both guys definitely in the right division now. Both were outsized in the light, or in the I've got these all mixed up. Bantamweight division. And, so they're definitely now in the right division for their size. And should be a good fight. Both these guys very quick and fast. Both these guys have been in the cage with bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz. Both have taken Cruz to a decision, and both have given Cruz a tough fight. Benavidez has fought Dominic Cruz twice and lost. Both great fights, and actually they're the only 2 losses in Benavidez's career. Joseph Benavidez is 16-2. And
trains at a Team Alpha Male, right?
Yeah, with Uriah Faber and
Scotty Jorgensen.
Yeah. So, this great fight, Mighty Mouse Johnson, both these guys, for the most part, decision, they like to go the distance. Benavidez, on the other hand, I think when in the deciding factor in this fight, for me at least, when I look at it, the matchup, it's who has the killer instinct and the ability to finish fights. And that goes to Joseph Benavidez. Mighty Mouse Johnson, don't get me wrong, he's a scrapper. He's going to put up a tough fight, but just looking at overall skill sets, Benavidez, he's pretty dangerous when it comes to submissions. If he can get this fight to the ground, he's sneaky. He can grab a hold of you and finish this thing. So this is a tough fight to call. Like I said, Mighty Mouse, tough fighter. He is coming off of the semi-controversial
duo with
Ian McCall. Yeah, their first fight. Yeah, was ruled a draw when technically it should have gone to another round. Correct? Is that how?
Correct. Yeah, and it was a point in the fight where it was pretty clear that it was a draw or potentially even a win for Uncle Creepy. And it was at a point in the fight where, it was so favored towards Uncle Creepy that there's a good shot that it had gone to a 4th round. I think everybody was favoring him to finish the fight or definitely win the fight. And that's one other factor to look at. Say what you will about DeMetrious Johnson as far as, maybe he's not as favored against Benavidez, but when you look at who had the tougher opponent to get to this spot, absolutely, you got to go with Mighty Mouse. Ian McCall is the top flyweight in the world. He beat Hussier de Silva, who's actually recently signed to UFC, who is, long-standing number 1, upset him, became the number 1 himself, and for good reason. It's not a fluke. I think Ian McCall is here to stay. I think we're going to see him challenge for the title against one of these future guys and reclaim his glory. It was a shame that he did get robbed in that fight. He had a follow-up fight, which was close, although it looked like Johnson, he definitely won it fair and square, at least in my opinion. The second one.
Uncle Creepy, is that really his nickname?
Oh, yeah. He's one of the funniest guys in MMA, I would say.
He's actually just coming out of jail recently, right?
Yes,
did he do a little?
That was actually a mistaken thing, though. It wasn't like the cops labeled him as, I forgot if it was like a drug dealer or something like that, because there was... he had been told that he had in his past, he was a drug abuser and everything, so that's he's like one of those turned around stories like Court McGee. But there was a prior, warrant out for his arrest or something, and he had been told that everything was cleared off his record from the past, and this is something that wasn't, so it had just been really kind of sitting, technically, in his, whatever you want to call it, account with the state. And police saw it, and then were like, oh man, you've been avoiding arrest for this whole time. So they took him in and kept him in jail for the better part of a month, which is really unfair, because had he known, he would have just gone and done whatever community service or handled it properly. So he basically had to serve jail time due to an incompetence by the American justice system.
Gotcha. But yeah, so man, this is a tough fight to call. Like you mentioned, definitely Mighty Mouse Johnson. The tougher the qualifying matchups for the Flyweight Championship, and he's got solid wins over, Miguel Torres, tough fight with Dominic Cruz, and
the aforementioned Ian McCall.
But, I got to just go with my instincts on this one. I think Benavidez, this is his division. This is his time to shine. He gave Dominic Cruz 2 tough fights in the bantamweight division back in the WEC. And, I think he's at home in this division, and it's really Benavidez' time to step up and get the recognition he deserves, because he's always been kind of overshadowed. And like I said, his only 2 losses are to Dominic Cruz, who, really is a top pound fighter. And I know Benavidez is definitely making his name known on a few lists out there, creeping in on to the top 10. But tough fight against Mighty Mouse Johnson. But I'm going with my instincts. I'm just saying Joseph Benavidez pulls this one out. And I'm going to say he catches Mighty Mouse Johnson in a submission. And, I know Mighty Mouse Johnson definitely wouldn't be afraid to grapple with Benavidez. Benavidez also got a wrestling background himself. And I can see this fight, ending up on the ground with Benavidez once again. I'm going to pick a rear naked choke. I think Benavidez gets Mighty Mouse Johnson's back, slaps into submission, wins this fight. I'm going to say it comes in the 4th round. It's going to be a back and forth fight. It's going to be a fast one. These guys are going to put on a show, I think. And I'm picking Benavidez to win by 4th round submission. Coop, what you got?
I think one factor that we kind of overlooked that even actually Vegas oddmakers had caught on to by the time Ian McCall and DeMetrious Johnson were fighting a second time, and that is the notion that DeMetrious Johnson was favored, even though he was pretty much by all fans favored to lose against Ian McCall in the second fight. The reason being is that Johnson has a style that wins him fights in the judges' eyes that he should have lost. Against Miguel Torres, split decision. I think everybody else thought Miguel Torres win for the most part. Against Ian McCall, a draw at best for Mighty Mouse, and again, the judges, one of them who was added up wrong, particularly thought he won, or at least did enough that it was a draw. He kind of has a history of that. His style, even when he loses, he wins, they say. So I think he definitely has luck on his side, if you could even count, if there was such a thing as luck factoring into this equation. I think Johnson has that on his side.
The decision against Torres was a unanimous decision, but I'm trying to remember the fight. That's the one that took place a lot on the ground, if I'm correct, with Torres off of his back, being more of almost the aggressor off his back, going for submissions, striking off his back, guard. With Mighty Mouse just pretty much being on top, if I remember correctly. Not really maybe doing so much, but having, the top position. But Miguel Torres was definitely the more active fighter off of his back, if I remember correctly. Was that the fight that I'm thinking of?
Yeah. Reminiscent of, when you see Diego Sanchez on his back, or the guy who kind of was really I don't know if you can call it the inventor of that style, because, you never want to get put on your back necessarily, but, Boss Rutan, he really was the guy who won fights with an active guard. That's who he won the title against Kevin Randleman, was, just having an active guard, being active from his back. So it is possible. Just because you're on top doesn't mean you're doing more. And hopefully that's a trend that we see shift in the judges' eyes. Because, it all depends on the fighter on the bottom. If it's somebody like, like a kickboxer, somebody who gets taken down and you can just kind of sit on him, and then, it's not really that much of a threat. But if you look at a guy like Fabricio Verdum, you get that guy on his back, and that's like one of his top 2 most dangerous positions.
Yeah, so that just all goes back to, having that style in the judge's eyes. He might not have done all that much against Torres off the top, but just being on top position, landing a few strikes here and there, looked like he was, having the advantage in positioning and whatnot. But yeah, he has that style. He wins fights by making judges think that, he's the controller.
Yeah, I don't know if he does it on purpose or it's just in his style, but he's definitely a master of the current point system. And he's a fighter that, should MMA judging kind of, or at least, the perceptions of judges kind of shore up and, get more progressive, he's a fighter that would not benefit from that at all. That isn't to say that he's gotten by entirely on luck. I do not want to discredit the many accomplishments of Mighty Mouse Johnson. I think he was a worthy title challenger to Dominic Cruz. And, of course, dropping down to flyweight, he looks better than ever. even in lieu of almost losing to Ian McCall. He did come back and beat him, which, that was one of the bigger upsets for me, because based on the first fight, I was one of the people picking Uncle Creepy for sure. But Benavidez, although he looked more impressive in his fight, it wasn't as tough of an opponent. I still think that this one's going to come down to who is better trained and prepared. I think Benavidez is going to come in with a better game plan, better coaching. I think they're going to come in equally conditioned. I see Benavidez taking this one for sure. I think it's going to be a decision, though. Another decision. I think it's going all 5 rounds. I think it'll be one of those really fast-paced fights, and it's only going to really slow down when one of them controls the other one, usually when DeMetrious Johnson's in control. But I still think it'll be exciting, back and forth, but I still think he wins it at least 3 rounds to 2.
All right, we are tied going into the main event. We are both picking all 4 of the fights below as the same, and, I get a sneaky suspicion that it's going to be 5. But we're moving on to the main event. Jon Jones taking on Vitor Belfort. Belfort, a wild turn of events with this matchup, but this is what we're given by the UFC. Not a horrible fight by any means. It's an interesting matchup for sure. And but yeah, Jon Jones takes on Vitor Belfort for the light heavyweight championship. Originally supposed to be Jon Jones against Dan Henderson at UFC 151. We all know that that event was canceled. Jon Jones didn't want to take a fight with Sonnen. Machida couldn't step in on time for this fight, so then we get Belfort. And Belfort, definitely, he's a contender right now in the middleweight division. So he's on a run there, but he's stepping up. He does have experience in the light heavyweight division, but, Jon Jones, a huge light heavyweight just in terms of his length, his reach. And so definitely, yes, Belfort has had experience in the light heavyweight division, but he should be outsized in this matchup. It's going to be tough to get inside on Jon Jones. We all know Belfort's style. The way he wins fight is with his quick hands, his combinations, his speed, getting inside, and just, bull rushing, in a sense, his opponent until they, lights go out.
How about Jon Jones' key to victory?
Jon Jones, use his reach, keep Belfort from not coming inside against him. But, what I really hope Belfort does differently, and I'm just going back to his fight with Anderson Silva, is I really think he gave Silva a little bit too much respect. He kind of waited for Silva to come to him. He did actually land in the fight the first combination. Belfort attacked and landed good shots against Silva, but we all know what happened with the crane kick in that fight and how that ended. But I really think Belfort needs to come into this fight and know he is the underdog, and the longer this fight goes on, the more it's probably going to favor Jon Jones, and he needs to try and really just come out, put the pressure on Jon Jones, use his speed, and hope for the best, and just hope that he, his fist connects with Jon Jones. And we really haven't seen Jon Jones's chin tested. We saw Machida land a couple decent shots on him, but other than that, Jon Jones' chin truly hasn't really been tested. And, Belfort's definitely the guy that can do that. And if he lands some of those on Jon Jones, I'm sure Jon Jones, some of his combinations on Jones isn't going to like it. And, I wouldn't count Belfort out of this fight by any means. You can never count someone out with that kind of speed, that kind of power. And, I don't think Jon Jones is by any means taking Belfort lightly. I think, he hasn't had a whole lot of time to train, a full camp to train for Belfort, but you asked for keys to victory from Jones. I think he, keep the distance and not be afraid to use his wrestling, put Belfort on his back, and use those vicious elbows that Jon Jones has become known for.
All right. Well, okay, so that key to victory for Belfort, key to victory for the champion. But I want to know, so analytically speaking, how do you see this fight going down?
So how I see this fight going down? Coop's taking a quick break, but to fill in, Jon Jones needs to use his, mix things up. His reach, his wrestling, and he definitely has more versatility in this fight, I think. On the feet, use his reach, keep Belfort from coming in, but also to, like I mentioned, take this fight to the ground and use those vicious elbows. I think, honestly, that's how I see this fight going. I think the fight ends up on the ground. I think we see Jon Jones raining down elbows on Vitor Belfort and working his way to a TKO victory. But, I definitely side with the fact that Belfort needs to come in with the mindset that he needs to end this fight quick and fast. And, if that means putting himself at risk, Jon Jones really not known for, knocking people out, so he shouldn't really be afraid of Jones's power on the feet at all by any means. So, I mean,
power.
Yeah. So, I really think Belfort just needs to say, hey, what the heck? Go balls to the wall, pull a, Vanderlei Silva, and just run right through Jones if he wants to win this fight. But not how I see it going down. I think if he does, get close to Jones at all, Jones, can grab a hold of Belfort, take this fight down to the ground pretty much at will. His wrestling is, that good that I think he pretty much take down anyone in the division. But yeah, so, I mean, I'm dropping my prediction out there. I'm taking Jon Jones. I think Belfort survives the first round, but I think Bones uses his wrestling, eventually gets this fight to the ground where we see, a repeat of the Brandon Vera fight, very similar, or the Vladimir Mastyuchenko fight, or the Matt Hamill fight, which he lost, but, same sort of position. Got the guy on the ground, rains down those elbows, and either, knocks the guy out or forces a TKO. So I'm taking Jon Jones by second round, take this fight to the ground, rain down elbows, and it's just going to be too much for the Phenom.
Interesting. You have Jon Jones favored, as I think just about everybody does. Really large point spread on that one. We're talking in terms of Vegas money. But, Belfort has only been legitimately knocked out once in his career against Silva. He's been TKO'd by Couture in the past, but again, that was like an exhaustion TKO. It wasn't a reflection of Belfort's chin. So if Jon Jones does...
Wait, what was that last fight you mentioned?
Him against Couture, his first fight against Couture in third.
What about the Anderson Silva fight?
Yeah, that was the only... That's why I started with that one.
Oh, okay.
The only time he's been knocked out, ever.
Gotcha.
So he's one of the best chins in the
sport.
Oh,
you said Silva. I was thinking Vanderlei for some weird reason. But yeah, okay, Anderson Silva.
No, yeah, he annihilated Vanderlei, obviously, to the point where now Dana White still doesn't even think a rematch is necessary. But with that being said, Belfort's one of those tough guys to figure out for his opponents, even though you kind of know what to expect, sort of like a Dan Henderson thing. He still seems to get people. But, Belfort kind of gets praised as being the best boxer in the sport, but that doesn't really make sense. If you look at his style, it's not really boxing. It's almost like brawling, but more technical because he has more accuracy, and he does throw more combinations now. But, a lot of his, if he was just fighting on instinct, is a little bit more of, pumping crosses on, each hand powerful enough to knock out somebody with, even on a jab. And then, he moves forward from there. But he's not really a guy to stand there and kind of throw and just stand and trade combinations, although Belfort, one of his strengths really does seem to be adding more to his game. He has a karate coach he's been working with basically ever since he's been at 185, and that's really shown in his game. His movement's a little bit different, not so much like a kickboxer like it used to be, but he's trying new things with his footwork. He has mixed in a little bit more kicks for sure, although that's something that Belfort historically kind of hates, is leg kicks. I think that's something we're going to see from Jones in this fight. I think Belfort, he really shines, offensively at least, in this kind of no man's land. It's like closer than when you're squared off with somebody, but not quite close enough to clinch with them. It's like this little kind of window. It's like Belfort's like the only niche fighter in it who really can be successful at it. But he can wing combinations at people, with not enough space. Usually you need enough length to kind of have your arms be able to reach out to throw the combination, but Belfort just like an up right in your face brawler and can still throw the combinations. If you go back and actually study fights of his, like let's say against Tito Ortiz and stuff, you'll know what I mean, because he's in range where Tito's like, it's so uncomfortable. Tito can't decide whether to clinch with him or to keep on blocking, and he kind of alternates between the two. Belfort should be close enough to grab, yet he's throwing and reeling off combinations on Tito, so he finds himself covering up. So that's something that Jon Jones is not great at, right?
Yeah, well, I was gonna throw out the question. I said, key to victory for Belfort is to, not be afraid of Jon Jones's, reach, not be afraid of his power into bull rusher. But might we see Belfort take, a page out of Machida's book and maybe not so much be the aggressor, but to really pick his shots, have Jon Jones be the attacker and come to him and, counter strike. And we saw, Machida is definitely, he's the only guy to really, I think, win a round against Jones that first round, and he pretty much had Jones coming for him, and he counter-strike Jones the whole time. Might Belfort take a similar page out of, Machida's book, let Jones come to him and pick his shots, maybe frustrate Jones a little bit by not being the aggressor, not coming at him, and, really forcing Jones to do something maybe that's not in his game plan.
Yeah, I think that's the key to victory for Belfort, and you can kind of almost label that as like the element of surprise. Jones knows what to expect from him, but he kind of doesn't at the same time because you really don't know until you face him. We've seen Jones get tagged against guys slower than Belfort, like Rashad Evans. Rashad in the first round, most people gave Rashad the first round because he tagged Bones with that overhand right. He just didn't follow up on it properly, and the rest of the fight was spent with Bones walking down Rashad instead of Rashad actually capitalizing on what he should have been doing, which was getting inside and teeing off. Because it's almost like when you saw some of Brock Lesnar's earlier fights, he really doesn't like to get hit, even if he has a good chin. Bones may have a solid enough chin, but he really doesn't like to get hit. He seems squeamish when he does. Seems like he kind of panics and freaks out and backs off for a second. He's not a good technical striker at all. I know everybody's going to disagree with me on that, but if you think of it in terms of actual striking, Jones isn't he's not going to square up with you and throw combinations. He'll throw out the same leg kick and stuff like that, and he's really diverse and it is effective and it works for him. But most of his really effective striking comes from clinch range when he has you against the cage. He isn't one of those guys who's going to throw combinations at you. He'll throw maybe, if it's a combination, chances are it's going to be something really creative and weird.
Yeah, well, I think what some people might consider technical striking for him is, he's really, figuring out how to utilize his reach to his advantage. So maybe, he might, like you say, not have the most technical striking, but he's definitely finding ways with those leg kicks that you mentioned, not doing a whole lot of damage, but really using his length to keep fighters, at a distance and away from him. So maybe that might be where people consider him a technical striking. And yeah, he occasionally will throw out, a spinning elbow or a spinning kick, but, whether those can be considered technical or not is, up to whoever's watching. But still, yeah, I think he's more of utilizing his reach well than maybe necessarily being a technical striker.
Yeah, he absolutely, because he breaks a lot of rules of good striking. His hands are not within covering range. He gets away with it because he's so tall. He basically fights how Stefan Struve should fight. Struve should be fighting like him, or he should be fighting like Semi Schilt. That's how Jones would be fighting if he was actually good at striking, but he isn't. Jones will step off of his back foot, which will, leaves all kinds of room for if let's say if he was fighting somebody who was close to his length, who could definitely catch him like that. Instead of kind of having the quick movement forward, he'll just step off his back foot, which is a no-no in, classic striking. And even MMA striking, which, if there ever is, hypothetically, a future matchup with Gustafsson, if Gustafsson can keep it on the feet, I am going to be somebody who would lay the rent money down on Gustafsson. But again, that's a big if even there. So this fight right here, I think what we're going to see a lot of from Bones is leg kicks. Vitor really doesn't like them. He hasn't responded to them well historically, and I think Greg Jackson's going to be on to that. If any coach would be, he would be. I think you're going to see Bones try to, go for that. And I think this fight's going to be a little bit more reminiscent of kind of the Shogun fight. I don't know if it may be as brutal, it may not. I see it ending in a submission for Jones, like the fight against Rampage. But I think Belfort is going to maybe throw some, Belfort's going to come in hot, let's put it that way. And I think he's going to give some trouble to Bones early, make Bones kind of tentative and standoffish. So I think Bones is going to take a really slow pace, as he's been doing lately, and then try to wear Belfort down eventually with kicks to kind of stifle his movement and keep him at bay. And then he'll surprise him with a takedown, eventually leading to, positional control and a dominant position, which will set up the submission.
All right, so we agree completely on our main card picks. All
Great
five.
minds think alike.
Yeah, so, hey, if you're going to go throw out some bets, then, it's a good thing we're agreeing because, I don't know. I mean, definitely the fights have the chance to go, there's always surprises in this sport. And even though we agree, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. But yeah, no, we're just a couple fans talking about the fights. That's how we see these going down. I'm looking forward to the card. That's this Saturday, live on pay-per-view, UFC 152. That pretty much sums up our predictions. And we are just now reaching an hour into the show. Just briefly go over a couple of the headlines that we've mentioned. First episode of the Ultimate Fighter on FX.
Team Nelson versus Team Carwin.
Yeah, Fight Night or Ultimate Fighter Fridays on FX. Not a very good time slot, I don't think. I got other stuff I need to be doing on Friday nights than watching Ultimate Fighter. That's why I DVR'd it, or the last hour. Unfortunately, I missed the first hour. But yeah, just gonna drop some quick thoughts. For the most part, the second half of the show, from what I saw, not fights weren't too exciting. There's some decent finishes, but overall, didn't see anyone that really stood out in the qualifying. So we'll see once these guys get some training and actual fights and some competition how the season will turn out. Looks like the house is gonna be pretty wild. Just looking at the recap, one guy in particular, I forget his name already, but
With the pink hair.
guy with the pink hair, just looks like he's gonna be out of order. But he was also the last pick. But yeah, pretty much my thoughts was I would have been stoked to be on Team Carwin. Roy Nelson looks like a bum. He doesn't look like he wants to be there all that much. Definitely Carwin's coaching looks better. I had no idea who the two guys were standing behind Roy Nelson, but I did know Marquardt was behind Carwin. And
I've actually heard Nelson's getting the Diaz brothers.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I have heard that. So, yeah, that's a huge plus then. Diaz, I don't know how well of a coach the Diaz brothers are, but, they got the skills, and I'm sure they're up for, helping out the talent. But, yeah, so I've missed the last couple seasons of Ultimate Fighter. I'm going to try and keep up with this season. Overall, I don't know. It seems like same old stuff, but I guess I'll tune in. And I don't know if I'm really looking forward. I mean, Nelson and Carwin aren't the most charismatic people. Nelson can be, but he's also got that strange boringness to him in a sense. Dana White calls him out on it. Underachiever is a good word. He that's what Dana White called him, the ultimate underachiever, just because his just doesn't look like he cares. But yeah, so I'm gonna tune in Ultimate Fighter. And Coop, any thoughts? I know you watched the episode. Any shout outs? Anything you wanted? Any fights?
Yeah, actually, I think that the coaching, I think it might be a little more entertaining this year, even though the normally stoic Carwin, is probably going to want to continue his personality trend. I think Nelson might kind of drive him out of that shell a little bit. And I'll have to we will disagree on this. I think Nelson's hilarious. I like him. He's funny. I do know what you mean, though. You kind of know what to expect from him, and almost kind of like he cares a lot and he trains hard, but he sort of doesn't care a little bit at the end. It almost feels like he doesn't do 100%. So you kind of know that what you're all is in for with Roy Nelson.
Yeah, I also feel like he's kind of finding this whole, feud with Dana White, fun. Like he wants to kind of play that up. It's just kind of like, I don't know. I know Dana White mentioned that at the end of the season, he really hopes fans still want to tune in and see Shane Carwin against Roy Nelson because he feels, by the end of the season, people are going to be wanting to see Dana White against Roy Nelson. Because, I guess these guys, they've always not really been fond of each other, and they've kind of always butted heads for whatever reason on different things. But
I think there's a lot of respect, though. I think it's more of kind of like a sibling sort of, or like boyfriend, girlfriend, almost like
bickering. Yeah, Dana White, calling Roy Nelson the ultimate underachiever can also be looked at as a compliment in a sense of, Dana White wants this guy to succeed. And I mean, I wasn't expecting, Nelson coming off the Ultimate Fighter after winning, knocking out all these guys. Nelson, he's always kind of been known as a grappler and a solid fighter, but I mean, he really made an impact coming off of that Ultimate Fighter show and, knocking out Stefan Struve, knocking out Brendan Schaub in the finale. And so, I mean, he was close there to getting a shot at the title if he rattled off a couple more impressive wins. And so I think Dana White really wants to see that Nelson, whereas in his last couple fights, it just looks like he's kind of, in a sense, given up a little bit. Referring to the Frank Mir fight in particular, and the fight against Dos Santos wasn't that great, but Dos Santos is champion. But yeah, it just seems like he's underachieving.
Well, yeah, he did. Well, he did definitely just paste Dave Herman in the last fight with an overhand right, brutal knockout. Pee-wee's actually booked. Pee-wee, one of the top prospects in the sport, so that was pretty impressive on Nelson's part, even if it didn't really show any new facets to his game. He is losing weight, and even though he took a lot more damage in his fight against Junior Dos Santos. He definitely give Junior Dos Santos probably his toughest fight in the UFC. I know he's lost one outside of the UFC, but like you said, when Nelson fought Frank Mir, I mean, there was less damage landed than Dos Santos, but it was Frank Mir, dominated Roy Nelson in a more one-sided fashion than Dos Santos did, because Nelson really didn't do anything at all.
Yeah, and I don't think it helped that, Frank Mir didn't look all that impressive in victory either in that fight. Kind of both guys gassed. It was a sloppy fight.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, both guys, you expect fireworks, and then you get something where they kind of cancel each other out, and then it ends up going for a while, and then later in the fight, neither guy's known for exceptional cardio, even if they both improved that quite a bit. And Nelson claims he was sick,
I think a lot of fans are looking forward to that fight just with the history between the two and the infamous grappling match where Roy Nelson defeated, I think, did he end up submitting Frank Mir? There was the grappling jiu-jitsu match back in the day, just, between the two.
Yeah.
And, Roy Nelson came out a winner. So I think hardcore fans are looking at that fight grappling.
It was actually a trilogy fight, believe it or not. Frank Mir won their first one, but Nelson won the second one when they were both better at the time. Although, to be honest with you, Frank Mir, the actual jiu-jitsu world is not very accomplished. I know people are going to say, what the hell? But if you compare him to actual grappling competitors, he's not one of those guys like Damian Maia or something like that. I mean, he really just has really jiu-jitsu for MMA. Don't get me wrong, he can win black belt tournaments for sure. That's how he got his black belt and everything. But, he's lost on points to Babalu in grappling and stuff before. So in the actual grappling world, Frank Mir's style isn't as suited as it is for MMA. I do think that now that I think about it, the Roy Nelson-Frank Mir fight was only really bad in the third round, because I know there's some pretty exciting moments, like Frank hit Nelson with 1,000, it seemed, knees from the clinch, Muay Thai clinch, and then also judo tossed him and was probably the fattest judo toss we've ever seen in Octagon history.
Yeah, no, the fight had its moments, but both guys gassed, so I think at the end it was just, that's kind of overshadowed the fight. But, moving on, we're just about ready to finish up, but, Ultimate Fighters on Friday, Shane Carwin, Roy Nelson, another season. We'll see how it turns out. Kind of excited I'll be able to finally tune in. I've got cable, so, back on the Ultimate Fighter train. But, I'm going to close on huge breaking news this week and unfortunate news. Two fights canceled at UFC 153, the co-main event and the main event. Luckily, the card wasn't canceled as a whole, and UFC's been able to find some replacements. But new fights, co-main event, Glover Teixeira takes on Fabio Maldonado. Fight's okay, matchup, it's a fight. But, more interestingly, the main event, Anderson Silva stepping in, taking on Stephan Bonnar, light heavyweight division, not a title fight, and Bonnar just a huge underdog in this fight. It's definitely a rocky story if he somehow pulls off a victory, and it's an interesting matchup for Silva because really not a lot for him to gain at all. He's really saving the UFC here by stepping in, probably getting paid pretty well for it, which is probably why. But he's got on the horizon. He's waiting to see the GSP result but definitely looks like that's a fight that's in the works. GSP Anderson Silva. Rumors are having it that he was on the shelf till 2013 because he wanted to wait and see how the GSP matchup went. But yeah, so we get Stephan Bonnar against Anderson Silva. And, I mean, it definitely interesting matchup. Bonnar's a big light heavyweight. Anderson Silva definitely, when he packs on the pounds, can hold his own in the light heavyweight division. So by no means is he outsized. But, Bonnar is a big light heavyweight and does have a little bit of a wrestling background, which we've seen is a weakness to Silva. But, Bonner's going to bring a fight, whether it's, Forrest Griffin repeat and he gets knocked out in the first round and Anderson Silva walks away unhurt and just, looking like a legend. We'll see. But, I think Bonnar steps in and, gives Silva a little bit of a fight. I don't know where exactly this fight's going to stand in Bonnar's career, whether, this could be, a final going out depending on how the result goes. Bonner's been asking for a big fight. He's wanted Rampage, but he's getting Silva, and I know, Bonnar is stoked about this fight. This is exactly what he wants, and he's coming, and he's going to bring a fight. And that's what, Bonnar always brings a fight, man. He's tough to finish. I don't even think he's ever been knocked out or finished in the UFC.
No, or
submitted.
Well, there was only on a cut, not an actual finish.
So, Bonner's tough as nails. And like I said, he brings a fight every time he steps in the cage. So just for that, whether he's a 13-1 underdog or not, I want to tune in. I want to see this fight. It's an intriguing matchup. Period. And maybe it's a beatdown from Silva, but either way, you're going to get a good finish or you're going to get a fight.
Yeah, I think that it has a lot of people excited for those reasons. Historically, Bonnar's been one of those guys who, it was kind of an ultimate underachiever himself. He looked dead even with Forrest Griffin when they fought, and then Forrest was the one who rapidly improved and kind of ascended the light heavyweight division. He had a little bit of a lucky streak. Forrest did, what with, how the fights that he wound up getting. There is a philosophy of Ultimate Fighter winners getting favorable treatment from the UFC. And Bonnar kind of was a little bit of a black sheep for a bit because he tested positive for steroids. And had a little bit of injuries marring his career, let's just put it that way, for a while.
And a fight against Jon Jones. I believe it was Jon Jones' debut fight in the UFC, I want to say. Maybe his second fight, follow-up, I can't remember. But, Bonnar gave Jon Jones a hell of a fight in that 3-round brawl. Jon Jones looked good, but look where Jon Jones is now. And Bonnar, I think, has given Jon Jones the toughest fight of his career inside the UFC. I can honestly, looking back, yeah,
I don't think he had. I can agree with you on that. I don't think he had the most likelihood of winning, but in the third round, Jones gassed and Bonnar hit him with a bunch of uppercuts from the clinch, and shots from the clinch. Although the first 2 rounds are pretty, domination. And if you were to say who of his fights has the most likely chance of beating him, I'd have to say Machida. But who actually gave him the toughest fight, I would say, Bonnar was a little more grueling at that point.
Yeah. So. But yeah, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about UFC 153 in the coming weeks in our shows. A couple other intriguing matchups on that card, but we've gone over an hour, and we're going to finish up the show right there. And but yeah, UFC 152 this weekend. Some good fights. This is our episode 4, and I guess we're done. So signing out. Check us out on Twitter. Keep subscribing, following, drop a comment. We'll give you a shout out. We'll, if you have any thoughts on the fights, we'll, give our thoughts on what we think and
give us a twat.
Whether you like us or not, some guys don't like us, as we've seen, but yeah, we're just having fun. So, but yeah, as always, Coop, thanks for joining me. Any closing words or anything else on your mind? We're running over.
Yeah, it's fight week. So, yeah, I'll keep it brief. Just tune in this Saturday as a fan of MMA, even if it's not the fights that we're all expecting. I'm still going to be tuning in, being just a fan of MMA in general. I think everybody should. I think just because you were spoiled into a really good fight with Dan Henderson and Jon Jones, not your first choice, doesn't mean that you should be turn your nose high and kind of be a little bit of a stuck-up brat about it. Fans have a tendency to do that sometimes. Our sport's no different. So tune in for sure. Great night of fights. Guarantee you won't be disappointed.
Yeah. So next week's show, we'll probably give a recap, rundown on some of the fights, the outcomes and what we think is next for fighters and whatnot. So yeah, tune in next week. Probably recap show and whatever other headlines come up during the week. But on that note, that's the end of our show. So see you next week. Peace.
Out.